Or hey, good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, Alex. Morning, Jorge.
Just a heads up, Sam, nothing from me on the com side, the marketing side.
Okay. Sounds good.
Morning, guys.
Morning, Helen.
Hello.
Morning, Bruce.
Morning, Sam. How are things?
Windy and snowy.
Ditto. Same here.
Outside my office, not inside my office, which is
Mercifully.
desirable. Yes. Welcome, folks. Agenda link in the chat. We'll get started in just a minute. All right. It's about that time. We are recording. Welcome, folks, to the January 10th, 2024 working group call. We are glad you're here. This is a Hyperledger call, and so the antitrust policy and code of conduct are in effect links here in the agenda. The agenda is linked in the chat. You are welcome to add yourself to the attendees list to make any other changes to be useful to the community. Is there anyone new that would like to introduce themselves? We're glad you're all here. Any announcements we should have on our list, but don't?
One we should probably mention is the bifold meeting on the 16th, and the idea of bifold moving over to open wallet. That's going to be brought up at Aries bifold meeting.
On the 16th?
Yeah, the 16th is I guess the standard bifold meeting time, and it'll be there.
All right. Any other announcements? All right, any projects want to share release status or work updates?
It was a quiet time over Christmas. We were remarking yesterday that we think people actually took time off.
Which I think is good.
I do too.
we have been very hard at work collectively as a community, so that is very good. Excellent. Okay, on our agenda today is a review. I wanted to touch quickly on our last meeting. This was on the 3rd. We had a slightly smaller group, but we had a really productive conversation. And so we have some notes here that are linked into the agenda. By the way, those that are new, you can navigate to previous agendas by either going to the 2024 or that doesn't expand. Let me do a little quick navigation here for you. If you go to 2024 working group meeting, you can pop up to the top. It should give us, after a brief delay, a list broken out by year. And so here's the 2023 as it goes down, etc. And so underneath, you can find all of the meetings there. I don't know why this is doubled. We'll look into that. There's actually a little bit of doubling going on early there too. Not sure why. Anyway, it's the 3rd meeting actually has the notes from last week, of course, and then the 10th is this week. So some wiki navigation if you're unfamiliar with that. Anyway, on the agenda, then we had discussed after the 2023 little bit of review and our plans that we would today also have a wish list conversation. A little bit less practical, but staring at the clouds and scratching our heads a little bit. One of the things that we maybe would wish hit the list, even if we don't yet either have the business incentive or anything to do it, but something that we think would be cool within Aries. And so that's the discussion topic there. Any other items we want on the agenda before we get going? All right. So review of last week. We talked a little bit about what happened. I'll go ahead and I'll give a quick tour guide review, and then any other comments or any other observations about that conversation would be super appreciated. And then we can discuss things that maybe we missed last week, which I think would be pretty great. So unexpected potholes. We expected faster progress in AIP2. The OWF emerged, and sort of difference discovery, figuring out alignment was something that happened, and that's continuing on into this year. We had a lot of rework within projects and a lot of library work and dependency cleanup. This was more involved than expected. And we also had some tuning of the projects given deployment experience, as we applied attention to some areas of the software that we hadn't really pushed as hard yet, and tuned up given deployment experience. So that was a little bit. This is a super brief review, but that's some of the things that we came up with. Any comments on 2023? All right, moving on to the Aries 2024 roadmap. These were This is nothing that's been officially decided or adopted yet. We'll talk about that in a second. But some low-hanging fruit here, and I'll come back to the annual report here at the end. But the unqualified DIDS community coordinated update is something that is low-hanging fruit. Obviously, for discussion, we've already been working on that and have good plans in place and good progress happening already. Some awareness and marketing, I think, would be great. Scalability report and visibility for implementations and deployments. Bhutan was brought up in their efforts. That would be a great thing to highlight for the community. A big one was alignment and interop efforts, and with a list of different types of events and organizations that to figure out the alignment that could happen there. I had highlighted the JFF Plugfest, and there's also the Open Agent Framework that is a Hyperledger Open Labs project, and so a handful of other things there. AIP2 completion is on the list, as well as AIP3 definition, aligned with DIDCOM v2, or potentially the trust spanning layer out of trust over IP, depending on how that lands and on what time frame. Ledger agnostic and non-creds. Some of these things are a little peripheral, but the support matters, right? As the ledger agnostic and non-creds work moves forward, then adopting within Aries projects is something there. OpenID for VC protocol support is already underway, but that's something that is more of that is on the roadmap, I think, for 2024. We talked about Aries RFCs. We need a good status review of the things that are there, so that we can highlight the most important things for people to read and understand now as they approach them. Getting them published into a nice format, and better like start here documentation, so that we don't, the best answer isn't just dropping people directly into the RFCs. And it's a better like start here, read this. It will guide you kind of through what we have here as a community is good. And so cloud reaching ideas is there. We also, and this is probably not organized very well, but mobile fragmentation was a topic that came up, in the sense that there's just a ton of variation there, and what we might do to understand it and to solve that well. So that is there. The other thing that I think I didn't put on the agenda, but we should carry over here, is this. We had talked about, this is a good time to discuss any changes that we think might be useful in our regular working group activities or meeting structure or anything else. It's a great time to have that discussion. So a little bit of tour guide there. Any feedback or thoughts from others that were there at last conversation, or folks that want to bring stuff up that should have been on this list but were not?
One thing that I'd really like to see this year is our scalability efforts.
So we had a publishing of scalability report. Is this something you'd like to expand to include just working on the scalability itself in addition to the report? I'm going to add, see, that's awareness marketing. Let me add another thing here. Let me qualify scale. We're talking size, size of projects, speed of projects. What's the right words there? Deployment scale, performance.
So a large number of users, basically.
Excellent. That could feed nicely into a scalability report here. Other comments or suggestions? The future of this is that we've done quarterly reports to the Hyperledger TOC, this Technical Oversight Committee, and that's been happening for a while. Those have been organized by Stephen as just a community effort, but they are also asking for this first quarterly report in the year to be more of an annual report. And so this is due kind of the end of January is when this report is actually due, and then we will present that at a meeting in early February. That meeting will be a lot more discussion based. I think under this new format, and so they're looking for more attendees than usual that are there. Often it's just Stephen or a few of us that presenting the quarterly report to the TOC, but more folks would be a good idea there, as we're just answering questions and talking about the project generally. And so there's a link here that talks about what's required in the annual overview. So the idea behind what we've been talking about goes into that annual overview so that we can organize this and then present it to the TOC. Also, an insanely useful thing for us to just do as a community. So it's a good effort that I think will result in the right kind of conversations there. So a little bit of background on why this is happening and what we're going to do with it. As this group report comes together, which can happen, after these conversations and drawing from the material that we've talked about, then we can that could use some review. I know Stephen would appreciate some involvement and review from anyone who's willing to put some effort into that report. Other thoughts on things that ought to be added, or points you want to make, or anything at all? All right, appreciate giving your feedback today and the feedback of everyone else who went into the original list last time. So that's really great. So I want to emphasize here too that the Aries project is what we want to make it for our needs. We don't have to. There's not a large degree of rigidity in what's going on, and if we as the community want it to be something else, or adapted in some way to better serve the needs that exist, then that's exactly what should happen. So if you're just want to highlight the flexibility of what we have in front of us here. Very cool. So the two topics remain here. One is a 2024 wish list. Another one is potential changes we might want to work to make to the working group operations here in the new year. And I think we could probably accommodate them both at the same time. And I've been thinking about this since last time, just on what I thought might be a good sort of a wish list item. And I'll have to pick words here to describe this, but I would love to see maybe via documentation or demonstration what the process is like to add protocols to our projects. And I guess I mean more specifically DIDCOM protocols, because the ones that I'm most interested about are the ones that work alongside credentials to enable trusted information and interaction flows. And I'd love to see the development of those. I think there's room for a ton of these. As we sort of expand, there's for obvious business purposes, lots of us have spent a lot of energy and attention on verifiable credential related protocols, but often there are protocols that live alongside those and benefit from the trusted information, but really aren't about verifiable credentials at all. And so I think that showing and demonstrating how those protocols can be added to the projects to sort of inspire other folks and other verticals with other specific needs, I think would be really cool, and I think that would be an overall benefit to the project. So that's my laying on the grass staring at clouds thing that I had. So I'm going to try and put words to that, and I'd love to hear thoughts from anyone else that matters here, or that you want to include. Other thoughts or ideas that folks have? We're a quiet crowd today. This is very non-committal in the sense that adding something to this list in no way commits us as a community or you individually to actually execute on these things, particularly in this wish list conversation.
Sam, were you ever able to bring up the idea of having a check-in meeting with the different bodies that sort of circle in this space, so that they could all come together and give kind of recaps of what the work is, what work they're doing? So having, you know, a representative from DIF and TOIP and OWF and Aries and everybody kind of come together in one place, kind of central place to kind of give updates for those individuals or organizations who maybe don't have the coverage to you know, continuously monitor all the different projects. Was that something that was ever able to be brought in any arena?
So we this came up last week as part of this across org check-in on like a monthly or quarterly, I think was the one that seemed to fit better basis. And this would be an easier way to kind of keep track of what's going on without being involved and more deeply, right? It's the span of meetings is impossible to keep pace with, and so none of us can go to all of them, and so. Yes, I did bring that up within the arena and bring it up to the awareness of the diff. I think that with the communication staff that they have there, they've tried to do similar efforts with like the interop working group that they've had, and this is not too dissimilar from that, but with a different focus and a different pace. And so that has been brought up there, and I think whoever does it, no one's claimed it yet. Whoever does it, I think it would be a fantastic benefit to the entire industry and community to have an easier way to kind of keep track of. And so we may end up with quarterly reports, not only to the TOC, but also to a more of a community oriented group there where we can, present a brief but informative, status of the projects that are involved and what's actually happening there. I think that would be really crazy powerful. Thanks for bringing that up, Helen. I love that idea that emerged last time.
That's something that might go to Daniela, and be the responsibility of the EDs of each group. You know what I mean? Judith, Kim Hamilton Duffy, Daniel at OWF, Daniela at Hyperledger, all around the identity pieces, and get them and their staff to define what are the most important messages or activities going on in those. IIW sounds like would cover 2 of the 4 quarterlies.
It might, but I think there's actually value in having it not happen at IIW. I think it would be cool to have an IIW session that maybe discusses this, but maybe having it released in advance of IIW would be kind of cool. And that way, number one, it's available to everyone, whether they're IIW or not. But that it's also not something IIW is of a nature when it's not online, which it hasn't been and doesn't appear to be for the near future. Is harder to get information out of it than when you're attending there because of its focus as an in-person conference. And so I think it could be done in conjunction with, but I don't know that it would be. And then it would be great to have a session to kind of quickly review or discuss maybe larger trends or collaboration opportunities there. But I think the actual report itself, the other thought that I had of the report is that number one, it doesn't actually have to be given live. And I was trying to debate in my mind whether something like audio would be nice, because then you could just listen to it, or if we actually just produced a readable report, if it would end up being such a wall of information that like no one would actually read it anyway, and that we wouldn't get the benefit that we're hoping for. I don't really know what the answer there, and it may be a combination of both written and sort of audio delivered or in a meeting or something, so that we can so that if people are interested, they can dig deeper into the actual written piece. But I think the org EDs, sort of coordinating that and committing to be involved, I think is absolutely the right step there.
And I think one more thing, kind of, laying in the grass, looking at the clouds, is having some way to quickly reference some type of, I don't know, library list or something of what deployed or pilots or implementations are out there, would be really cool. This is something that came up at the end of last year in one of the marketing meetings, saying, let's start kind of bringing folks to the table to kind of tell a little bit about the work that they're doing without being super committal, because I know that there's some some organizations that are flying under the radar because they haven't officially launched capital L whatever they're doing, but they're doing a lot of work, and they're doing a lot of they're doing a lot of work. And so having some way to get just a sense of what's happening in the community would be really cool. So whether that's self-reported list, whether that's people say, I don't know, some kind of informal reference point of kind of what Aries based deployments, something like that, I guess, is what's kind of circling around in my head, because I think that's what most people are interested in, is what people are actually doing with the project. And there's a lot happening. We know that there's a lot happening, and so just having all that in one place would be cool.
Any thoughts on the right way to do that? Is this like a regular presentation thing? Is this maybe an organization of links to stuff on a page? Like, any thoughts, Helen? You don't have to have answers here. I'm just wondering if you have any that you could share.
Yeah, I mean, the one that we were looking at, or what we were talking about, is just going around first to the organizations and individuals that we know are working on stuff, and having them, some kind of self-reporting table that's on, maybe that lives on the Wiki or something like that. Something that's really easy for people to find, so that when there are, say, new organizations or new, somebody is interested in Aries and they stumble upon us, they can quickly click on something and say, oh, that's really cool. BC Gov is doing blah, blah, blah. And DCO is doing blah, blah, blah. Anatomy, whatever, it's doing blah, blah, blah. Like, something that they can click on things, and we know that's populated with the ones that we know about. And then from there, just, again, creating space, holding space for people to self-report, say, hey, I just did this cool thing. I just made this whatever doohickey, and I know where to put it. And I know, and as we all are on these calls, we say, oh, cool, did you add that to the implementations list or something like that? So it's kind of all of us to kind of encourage one another. But just something that's really easy to find, something that's, just, it's not making a statement for your company or your organization. It doesn't need to go through marketing. God forbid we have to go through all the different marketing channels, marketing departments, but something that's just really informal, kind of like, here's a list of individuals who do cool things with this project. And here's some, a link or something to learn more about it, or I don't know, something very informal was what I'm thinking overall.
Cool. Thanks, Helen. Other thoughts, ideas, suggestions?
This is Jorge. I have a comment, I guess, maybe a suggestion. I've been going through a process recently of trying to do interoperability testing with Aries wallets outside of our own, the one we're building, just to be able to kind of demonstrate for our stakeholders, hey, look, we're implementing these flows, this is how it works, but look, it doesn't have to be our wallet, right? Like wallet becomes ultimately at the end of the day will become a choice, and these processes can interoperate with other wallets. And what I'm finding difficulty in is, ascertaining like what other Aries wallets are out there and what are their core capabilities. And the ones that I have been testing with, end up finding like mixed results. There's no like 100% compatibility with our flows. And so I just to piggyback on Helen's suggestion, it would be great to maybe have a voluntary listing of Aries implementations out there and like what specifically they're building around, and maybe even some videos to demonstrate their functionalities. I think for communicating to stakeholders who aren't necessarily familiar with these technologies or Aries, just being able to demonstrate it, look like these interoperability is key, and this is one of the value propositions for adopting a framework such as this.
That's awesome. Thank you.
And I think the conversation last week, when we got to the point of saying, having the different open source bodies come together and give recaps of what they're doing quarterly, I think that stemmed from a conversation just on that topic of interoperability, having a more regular cadence for like interopathons or events in which people can bring their wares, whatever they're working on, together and test interoperability. Just a real informal, kind of show up and see if stuff works. So this would be outside of the kind of confines of the interop profile, and yeah, kind of more of a down and dirty, hands-on type of setting, but just in a more kind of regular, like again, quarterly, or I don't know, every other quarter or something like that, so people kind of know what to look for, what to expect, and something to work towards.
One of the things that came up last time was the JFF Plugfest and the value of being involved there, even if we don't technically need it, just because of the visibility there, and assuming that all the active wallet projects and things are there. And so there's the people that are not involved enough to attend, then that would be a hard thing there. So yeah, cool. Other thoughts? This is excellent. Let's keep it going.
Is there, I hate to bring this up because I know it kind of opens up a bag, but like guardianship, is any of those kind of projects or working groups working on like how to deal with guardianship issues, like in a more formal way?
Want to expand what exactly you mean by guardianship?
The use of agents by minors, by physically hospitalized, incapacitation, instances where people aren't in control of their own wallet, cannot be, or legally are not able to, or whatever, and want to hand off. There's some mechanism where they can get hand off duties of utilizing their credentials for a period of time, maybe, refugee issues, all that kind of stuff. I know I've been conversations in the community, offline here and there over the last several years, and I can't remember where they're sort of landed on whether it's a technical issue or more of a governance regulatory issue.
This is related to, although not specifically, break the glass. Situations isn't the right word, but I can't think of a better one. There's been some discussion of like, what do you do if you're an EMT and you have a person and you're able to gain access? You know that they have, or there's a good chance that they actually have like medical information that you need access to. Is there a way that you can break the glass on permissions in a way that is logged and audited to prevent misuse of it, but that does allow rapid access to of that information to emergency personnel, for example? So this is not a simple issue. I want to clarify, but considering how we might enable types of information access that are not typically done without consent, but sometimes are really incredibly useful. You could allow, for example, credentialed medical professionals to of certain types to sort of break the glass on the term comes from like a fire alarm where there's like glass in front of it of a fire alarm handle. So if there's a fire, you're totally willing to break that glass and pull the handle. But otherwise, it kind of keeps it from being pulled accidentally, right? And the idea here is that your information in that scenario could be released, but only under specific circumstances and with a very obvious effect of having been done so. So this is a little bit related to that that I wanted to kind of draw some comparison to.
Yeah, I had heard of in the physical world, like if you are a child in foster care and you have a passport, it's the court system has a mechanism and a process in place for social workers to be able to control that passport and pass it along to the foster parent or the appropriate party that may be. So I was just wondering if there's some part of the Aries working group that's working on something similar, because I could imagine an instance like that. I mean, outside of just that example, but even for individuals, but businesses and different legal entities that have information that is technically under their control, and they have control over it or whatever. And then there are instances where maybe there's a legal requirement where they pass control along to somebody else over that information. So I don't know. It's a bit probably it's always been seen to me as a very big nut to crack, and so I just wasn't sure if anybody in the Aries community or any of the working groups have already been playing with that at all.
There's been light discussion, although I'm unaware of any super recently on that topic. I was just, while you're talking, I was musing a little bit on the way that boarding passes are currently done, and anyone who checks into a flight is able to basically get the boarding pass for other people that were booked on the same ticket. That's super convenient for parents, but occasionally it'll show up in a situation with like coworkers when you're traveling together for work. And that's a little bit entertaining, and mostly they've avoided the complexity just by like making those boarding passes available, which is interesting. But that's an example of guardianship where, like, if I'm going through the airport, I have the electronic boarding passes for my kids, or potentially my wife as well, on my device, instead of them individually having it on their own, and the utility of having that. So it's kind of in that arena.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember an instance where I had TSA pre-check and my husband didn't, so I had to give him his boarding pass, and then I left and went to pre-check, but was able to give him his to go towards when use the regular line or whatever. But yeah, being able to give that credential, separate them from, maybe it has an anchor credential of somebody else's, and then they're able to separate it, and that separation is documented somewhere or something. I don't know, but yeah, again, laying in the grass, looking at the clouds, that would be really awesome, as if somebody figured out some mechanism for guardianship.
That is very cool.
Sorry, I hate to be like controlling the conversation. Please, anybody jump in. But another idea that I had was tossing around with somebody, I think yesterday, was, is there a way to show when the connection has been broken? So if I've issued 1 million credentials and then somebody, one of those millions has, walked away, deleted, severed that connection, is there a way then for me to go back and say to my 1 million credentials, oh, I have 999,000, whatever, like there's one fewer than I had yesterday, because they have left or whatever. Like, I don't know if there's a solution to that. Does that make sense, Sam, what I'm talking about? Like, right now you can't tell if someone has severed the connection, even if you send them a message, like a DIDCOM message, it just gets caught in a mediator. You don't know if it's being delivered, but kind of knowing if that connection is still active or not.
I think this could be, this is not something that I know of any project that has done. So we have the trust ping protocol. It is a voluntary response, right? This is not something that travels back the other way intentionally because of the design of these systems. But I think it would be interesting to explore the use of trust pings as a way of just verifying the connections are still there. And in that way, if it's been past some threshold that you've gotten a message from another party, then you can set a trust ping and see if you get a response back, which could be some indication that it still is like an active connection. For example, one of the sort of severed things that could happen there, and I think this is going to be really common, especially in early days of implementations, is someone downloads a wallet, they get a credential, they use it for the one thing they're aware of, but unaware of like future uses, and then they uninstall the application. And whether the data is still there or not, because it's like been backed up in some other way, like they don't have it, they can't actively use this, and so they'd be unable to respond to a trust ping. And I think that knowing, which people are not really responding or there anymore, I think would actually be a really interesting thing. Not that you have to necessarily forget your side of it. You may have data that happened across the relationship or credentials that were issued or something that you could still retain, but it would be interesting to know if they're still there. And I think this may be not really the development of something new, but just sort of practices or best practices, within the software that we already have to enable that kind of a thing. But I really like that idea. I love emphasizing the trusted connections that result from this technology rather than simply the fact that you exchanged information once. That ongoing interaction, I think, is incredibly valuable, and this highlights that.
Is there like a best practices type of like manual somewhere or something? Because that would also be very cool.
We have some documented in Aries RFCs, but they're a little bit impenetrable to those who are not used to navigating through that. So referring to our previous documentation efforts on Aries RFCs, being able to highlight the ones that are considered, sort of best practice type of things, or to call out, aspects of that, I think would be really, really awesome. So another effort that we've talked about. Patrick, your hand's up.
Yeah, on a similar note, since we are talking about these like different use cases, so in terms of DIDCOM, I wonder if you are aware of any kind of chat initiatives in maybe more wider DIDCOM community. Is there anything like signal kind of thing based on DIDCOM, anything like that? Just wondering. That would be pretty cool to see, I guess.
There have been discussions a lot in pockets about what we call enhanced chat. We have basic message, but there is and it's I created and I named it basic message with the hope that I would provoke someone into creating something better. This was like SMS instead of MMS as an example. Like I was trying to make the simplest possible thing, and I know there have been some efforts and some folks that have been involved at various points. Enhanced chat turns out to have a bunch of aspects of it. Are we doing read receipts, emoji responses? Is one side of things. Another side is group involvement. DIDCOM by itself is natively sort of a one-to-one. And within group messaging, what type of group messaging are you doing? Is this a fully peer-to-peer scenario? Is this a moderated one? There's reasons why moderated stuff is really useful. For example, in youth sports teams, they often have requirements of a system which monitors all communication that involves a student athlete, so that parents and other coaches can be involved to prevent any sort of danger to the child. And so that would be I think that would be there. So I think that needs to be a revived conversation, Patrick, to your point. But I know that there has been some previous work and efforts along those lines. Keith, you already mentioned, could we publish the RFCs like we've done with doc sites like ECPI and AFJ to make them more broadly consumable? Yes, that is definitely something that has been discussed. It's going to be here somewhere. I'll find it. Aries RFCs and publishing in a nice format has been brought up. Stephen was the one that brought this up, and I know he has some major desires there.
I think you brought that up last time, and this probably stems from the work that he's done. So
Yes, which I think would be great. And part of that is also like a traveler's guide, right? Like I'm new here. Wow, what should I be looking at and where? The other thing that I added to that was a status review. Is we have a bunch of Aries RFCs that have been very useful historically, but are less current. And so I don't want to delete them, but I would love to not have people stumble into them and then get confused about what is really the current state of things. And so that's something else that also needs to happen, to add clarity to that effort. So totally agree. Stephen also likes that, the thumbs up in the list here.
I like the idea of how sort of Mozilla shows like this is a deprecated RFC, and I know we display stuff like use this in favor of this, but it would be great to be able to have like an icon that says like, this is out of date, this is not really widely used anymore, whatnot.
Yeah, there's a status mechanism at the top, but we haven't, as a community, been going through and updating those statuses. And so one of our probably we'll have a few meetings where we actually focus on getting those things updated, where we discuss those as a community, and then have some PRs that change the status of a wide collection of these to better serve that point. So we have a mechanism we're just not using very well. And so the first thing is to try and use that, and then in the nice rendering, I think we could certainly organize that. Meaning we don't make the deprecated ones front and center. We put those down at the bottom, like almost in an appendix or something, so that when people are coming to look, they see the ones that are not deprecated first.
Yeah, even if we just start with lifecycle badges, and that's the simple start to that, right?
Oh, totally. And we just need to do that. So that's on my list of active activities for the Aries community, coming up in this new year. So schedule, in advance that, hey, this next meeting is going to be a status review. Please go see the ones that you would like the status to be changed on, so that then we can actually, actively go change those and make those things happen in fast order. these are fantastic conversations, and please keep it coming. If you notice long airtime, that's deliberate because I want us to think a little bit and have room for anyone that wants to contribute something.
Sam, do we have anything when it comes to uh political goals or motivations that need to be included here?
You might need to clarify exactly what you mean by political.
Regulatory.
That's less controversial. So regulatory goals that or regulatory requirements that Aries projects can fulfill. Is that what you're indicating?
Yeah, so several governments are mandating particular protocols. Are there ways as a community that we can encourage or fulfill those types of requirements?
I think informally, we, for example, we have the OpenID efforts that people are adding, but we never really had a discussion or review to say how can we align Aries with these other projects. It's just that people have kind of come up with the desire to have those things implemented sort of as a second order. But I think more regularly or more formally, we could discuss these things as they are released or updated. For example, if a new version of one comes out, then that could be something that we address in the sense that we can try and invite an expert who understands it quite well, and then to understand what the options are, and then consider who within the community has has the either the requirement or the desire to align with those, and then how to coordinate efforts. And so I think that we could do this a little more formally. It reminds me a little bit of the alignment efforts as well. I think that whether we leverage that quarterly thing or in some other way, that we be a little more formal about changes we think we should make or efforts we think we should affect within the community in order to make that happen. So I like that. That's good.
Let me push that a little bit further, Sam.
Yeah.
And say, are there government education and outreach that we should be doing?
Ooh. So you're saying so communicating to governments. I like that. It's kind of a specific kind of marketing communication, but for a more specific point. It's a good idea.
The identity SIG does a pretty good job of bringing in a variety of kind of speakers and topics and things. I wonder if, you know, that kind of setting might be one that could be leveraged for something like that.
The other thing that I would really like to see is the creation of easy to integrate libraries into different languages. We've got, for example, the JavaScript library. It would be really cool to have the Python library and the C++ library and the Rust library, and much like HTTP could be integrated into different projects, I would like to see the Aries protocols easily integrated into more languages.
By Aries protocols, do you mean DIDCOM protocols created within the Aries community?
Yeah.
We have a ton now, so I'm trying to figure out what to write down that is different than what we already have. What we don't have are generic libraries for protocol handlers. Is that in the list of what you're thinking of?
Well, you know, so right now we've got JavaScript. I don't think we've got a Python library.
Well, we have Akapai. I mean,
that's not a library.
Can you draw a line for us?
So, that yes, it could potentially be solved by the Unify interface. Although I think the Unify layer right now is a little behind the other projects. But the concept being is Akapai is a server architecture. It's not a library that can be easily integrated into other projects, unless you're making API calls.
I don't know how to pull this apart. I know, for example, that this used to be true, and Stephen, maybe you can help clarify if I'm wrong here. That you could pip install Akapai and then use pieces of it or the whole thing integrated into a larger project. Is that still true, or was that never true and I was making it up?
No, absolutely. Yeah, you can do that. We've got
Isn't it something
pretty
that's
good examples of
documented? Did I miss that somehow in the documentation?
That's a tougher question. For example, yesterday, Patrick St. Louis presented on how he's used it in doing, basically, again, using it just as you normally would. Oh, Akapai as a library, maybe. So you're saying actually embed it in another
Yeah.
Python or oh, sorry. I just meant using it in other ways. Sorry, I apologize. Yeah, not that I'm aware of. No, sorry.
So we can't pip install
Yeah.
Occupy and just import it anymore.
I have no idea. No idea at all. Maybe you can, maybe you can't, but I don't know.
Okay. That I thought
Yeah,
that used to be a
sorry.
thing, but that's like dinging around my head as an ancient thing, which may not be at all accurate. So you've mentioned like JavaScript libraries. What do you imagine the scope of these libraries, Kim? And I know we're a minute over time, but I'd love to finish up this thought before we go.
Well, specifically, AFJ is very much library based, right? Whereas bifold is more like the equivalent of Occupy, right? I would like to see those libraries exist like AFJ for other languages. And perhaps it's using the Rust layer and pulling it out via the unify layers. But right now it seems that the Rust library is a little immature compared to the other projects.
Okay, we're out of time. The whole AFJ as a library, Occupy not as a library thing still tickles my brain because I consider them very similar. And it may be that there's just been some architectural differences made within the projects that affects that practical difference. But we are out of time. I super appreciate all of the feedback that we've used to produce this list here today and good thought topics that we can use to guide discussions going forward, which is fantastic. Thank you for coming, and we will see you next week.